yeah, I don't know. I really liked Melbourne a lot, and I could see myself like living there.
You should just come. Yeah, we're like well, not
I
now.
don't know. I'm like
Not
afraid to live in Australia, to be honest. Like there's like, anti-Asian racism
Oh,
everywhere
yeah.
before COVID, but my impression of Australia was that because they're more like the US in their politics and or in terms of like who's leading the federal government,
Mm.
I'm like afraid to live in a place like that, I guess.
Yeah, it's getting worse in the last few years. Like,
I'm sure,
you've
yeah.
probably seen those videos of like those two Asian girls getting bashed up and all the
Yeah.
spitting and
But it's
slurs.
happening here too. So I can't even really like I mean my friend like I've spoken to friends here who are, of Asian descent, and many of them have told me about how they experienced like public instances of like racism for the first time in their entire life of living. I mean, Toronto is very diverse. It's like I grew up in the US and I lived in a very white area in the United States. And then we moved to Canada.
Whereabouts in US?
Where in the US? Oh, I lived in upstate New York. The
Oh,
capital
yeah.
state is
Albany?
Albany. Yes. So I grew up in Albany.
Oh,
I got his PhD when we immigrated from China. And the immigration process was just insane for us. Like it was so hard. And my parents essentially gave up. And they were also worried about like my school, like going to university. And we were very poor, sorry. Like we did not have money to pay for like an American education. And I would have had to get like either go into serious debt or have to get like good enough marks that I would have to get a full ride
yeah.
year in order to even go to a good school. And they wanted me to go to like one of the best schools in the country. So it just wasn't
What school
feasible.
was that? Or
Well, I mean, when I was 8 years old, we went on a trip to Boston where they took me to MIT and Harvard,
oh,
full
wow.
Chinese parents.
Yeah.
And there's like pictures of me standing on the Harvard campus. Like that was their dream. They wanted me to go to Harvard.
Yeah. Because I worked at Peking University for a bit, and every day you
Nice.
see like little kids get taken by their parents, and the parents like, oh, 以后你要上这个学校, like, you gotta go to this school to the kids. I'm just like, that's so weird. And the kids are like 5 or like, or 8 like you. I'm just like, jeez, the pressure.
The
And
pressure is a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's even worth it. I feel like it's just marketing. I think that like the American education system is really bad.
Yeah.
And
It's connections, networking. That's
just,
all
I mean, like,
Yeah.
even beyond reading the stuff that's happening in the news, it's like, even before like the last few years, like when I moved to Canada about halfway through high school, and I'm quite old, so you were shocked to find out that I'm 35. So
No. Regan's close. Yeah, that's not old.
close.
34,
You're
yeah.
34. Okay,
And
cool.
I'm 27.
30 is
You're
the
not
new
old.
20.
We're around the
Yeah,
same
we're
age
like
range. Yeah.
we're the same range. A lot of my friends are late 20s as well.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, same.
like, so
I'm used to being the oldest muso in the room.
Exactly. And I think I act quite like babyish, to be honest. So most people can't tell that I'm like this age because I feel like I'm quite juvenile. But yeah, we moved to Canada in 2000, just before 9/11, actually.
Oh.
We kind of like, I feel like the US like was always, like I would say the US has been shitty since like, the beginning of the 1900s, but really started, the beginning of the end was 9/11. Everything from that point on, Y2K era was just a plunge into further and further disaster.
Xenophobia. And I mean, it's always been shitty since the start.
Yeah, it's always been shitty. I mean, my mom was treated terribly by US immigration. I still have a memory of going to the consulate in Beijing when I was like a child, and my mom taking me to like go to her visa interview, and how degrading and indignifying the experience was.
Are your
They talk
family
to you like you're
from Beijing or?
no, we're from so my mom is from Xi'an, so that's where I was born.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so and then my dad is from Wuhan. So
Yeah.
yeah, my dad moved to Xi'an to study. He was studying at Ximei.
Or
Yeah, it's like the Northwestern University in Xi'an, and that's where they met, and they got married, and then you know, they always wanted to immigrate to the U.S. My dad really doesn't like the Chinese government; like he really hates them. And my mom's side of the family has also experienced persecution from the Chinese government. So when I told them I wanted to move back to China, they're like, I definitely got yelled at.
dude, I get the same thing. Like, because my family got like ravaged during the Cultural Revolution, lost everything.
Yeah.
Because my granddad was an academic as well. He was a pharmacist and sort of like he taught at university. So when I told my parents, like, I want to go back to China, like, you're crazy. We took so long to get to Australia. And anyway, it's the same thing. They don't understand because I just feel so isolated. I don't know why. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's like, I don't know, like I haven't lived in China as an adult. I've lived so background is that in my 20s, I lived in South Korea for 2 years, and I worked there as an English teacher. So I know the life of like the English teacher in Asia quite well, except I'm Asian presenting. And so living there, I had a different experience than my white counterparts.
Oh, yes, 100%.
And,
That'd be interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I almost stayed there. I almost married a Korean guy and stayed there for good. But I was only supposed to go there for a year, and then I stayed for a second year. And then in the second year, that's when like the rose tinted glasses came off. Like, I loved being there. I loved being in Asia, and I loved being surrounded by people that look like me. But there's a lot of xenophobia in Korea. There's racism in Korea. There's a lot of sexism. I pretty much only dated Korean guys when I lived there because I couldn't stomach dating any of the white English teachers there, because they definitely had like an attitude that I found really gross, quite like, Asian fetish galore. And when, the experience of dating Korean guys, like there were lots of great guys that I dated, but there were also like, misogyny and quite patriarchal.
I read something, it's like the highest rate of domestic violence in Asia or something. I was like,
is in Korea?
Yeah, apparently so.
Really? It's worse than Japan?
Apparently so. That's what I read, but I'm not sure because it was a while ago. And I was really surprised because, because Koreans are very, how do I say, courteous.
Yeah,
and,
very polite. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very weird. How did you get into music then? If you were English teaching before,
I was always into music. I've been DJing since I was like 18, pretty much. But I grew up playing the piano. I don't want to say obviously, definitely playing it, but so it's just so many Chinese kids I knew also play the piano. But I learned music from a very young age. My parents loved music, and so I started playing the piano when I was like 4, basically. And they pushed me really hard to, playing 4 or 5 hours a day, that kind of thing. My mom was very much a tiger mom for sure. Yeah, it was a lot. And I was very stressed out and fatigued, and I even got sick from it. They chilled out a bit when we moved to the States, and I kind of took a break from it. Then I started up again with like Chinese American English teachers who and I continued my study until like pretty much like grade 10, and then I stopped. But it was not really like, I love music, but that wasn't what made me love music. That actually made me hate music.
Yeah.
and it just wasn't very creative, and I didn't like playing other people's music, like other people's compositions, which is funny because I became a DJ, and what does a DJ do except play music? But I just really loved like finding stuff that I liked on my own. You know, I grew up listening to hip hop. That was like my passion for sure. And then I went to university, joined the campus radio station, learned to DJ and mix records when I was there. And I just love the community around music. You know, people that I met through music were just, in my opinion, the most, at least at the time, the most progressive people I knew. People who were really open and not closed-minded. And we could talk about music, we could talk about politics, we could talk about philosophy. And I just really liked being in that kind of place. When I lived in Korea, I kind of had to take time off from that. And I kind of just immersed in Korean culture. I didn't really but then I came back and I picked it up again. And then it just kind of took off. Like I was lucky I met the right people who like taught me the ropes. And, you know, I started to throw parties, book artists, and they were really successful. And I started to make music, and turned out all of the stuff that I learned when I was a kid stuck, and it made it quite easy to learn how to make music because I had it's like a language that like now I'm like really grateful to my parents for pushing me to do that, because the things you learn at that age, it's like it's almost subconscious, the way that I hear music and the way that I can write music. It's like I almost can't explain it to people, like why I'm able to know these notes sound good together, because when you learn a language from such a young age, it's like explaining to people why I speak English in this way. What is the syntax? Why is the syntax like this? When you learn in your formative years, you really like retain that information. It almost becomes something that's like a part of you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I wish I had that.
yeah, it's like, you know, it's a language just like anything else, I think. And so I don't know. I've just been. I mean, my parents I did it definitely like in secret.
They were very supportive, I'm guessing. Yeah, because they
No, I
probably
mean,
prefer classical. Because
yeah,
that's what my
I
parents
mean,
preferred as well.
they could tell that I wasn't like gifted enough to be a professional pianist, and or like didn't have enough like of the discipline to do that. And they just thought that it was a good thing. Like a lot of Chinese parents think that it's good to teach children music because it helps them develop into like disciplined, well-rounded adults, right?
Yeah.
It didn't mean that they wanted me to have a career in music. And in fact, when I was in high school, I really had aspirations. I was in a band. I was learning other instruments on my own, and I was like, I really want to, you know, be a musician. You know, like I was in choir.
So you weren't studying music when you went to university?
No, I studied to be. I studied English. That was my other passion. I really loved to read. So I worked in publishing for 5 years. I worked in a book publishing company. Then I worked at a magazine publishing company after I came back from Korea. And that was like my last like professionalized job, until like it was just very exhausting. I would work like 50-hour work weeks at work, and then also throw parties and DJ on the weekend.
You're like the first major English teacher in Asia I've heard of.
Yeah, I know, right? We're not very, we're a very rare breed. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of Chinese friends because most Chinese kids I knew were not interested in the things that I was interested. I always felt like the odd one out. I was very whitewashed. And it like, that is something that I've had to contend with as I've gotten older. But yeah, no, I was always like the odd one out. I didn't know that many people in my work were Asian. I didn't know that many people like in music that were Asian. But in the end, like I found my community in Toronto, my music community, partly because I did eventually meet people who were Asian. And in
Yeah.
fact, my friend who taught me how to throw parties, she's from Shanghai. And
Oh.
my other best friend who like really taught me a lot about production, well, his family's from Hong Kong, so we won't hold that against him. But
Wait,
but,
where did you go to uni then? Like,
I went to Queen's University in it's like
oh, I've heard of that one. I've met people from
Harvard
that.
of the North. It's
Yeah.
pretty white, pretty bougie, a lot of economics major and business, like MBA people at the school. If you're studying like a science or anything like that, it's kind of bleak. It's not like a place where that is like the most open-minded or diverse. It's very white, but
Oh.
I'm able to find my people very early through the radio station, and for that I'm really grateful, because most other people, when I tell people I went to that school, they're like, oh my god, I would have never guessed you went to that school, it's so conservative. They just assume
Okay.
University of Toronto, which is like, you know, more like it's in the big city, there's more diversity.
Is that a Jordan Peterson school, Toronto or something?
Yes, Jordan Peterson teaches there. Yes, I think he still teaches there, I don't really know, but I mean, it's all a scam, to be honest. All universities are conservative in some way, shape, or form. They try to portray themselves as being like more open. It's just marketing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, like uni Mel, even the rankings are just a scam. Like I went to Melbourne, and it's like meant to be ranked top 30. Then I went to like a really crap university down in China. Well, it's meant to be ranked really low, right? It was like something like 师范, or something, 江苏师范.
So you went to school in China as well?
No, I went to work there. So
you
I was
worked
working
there.
as like I helped tutor like this really crappy class at Peking. So we got to go to university conferences, like teaching politics, and it was like an internship sort of thing.
I see.
And the students in China, they work 1,000 times harder than I ever worked in Australia. And they were going to universities way lower ranked. And I'm like, this is just a scam. Because at university, I learned nothing but how to party and take drugs, and that's it. While in China, they actually do learn things. Like, and I just saw how much of a scam Australia was. Because all we do is we let people graduate who can't even speak English after 3 or 4 years. And we just take their money. And we just keep, it's like a money churning machine. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the West doesn't even try to have some semblance of a meritocracy. I mean, I do think I remember my university experience. Like I don't know what it's like in Australia, but like when I moved to Canada, I forgot to mention, I never finished this story. When we moved to Canada, I almost flunked. I went from straight A, 4.0 GPA in the States, like top 5 percentile in all of this, and then moved to Canada, and I almost failed grade 11 math. I could not do math in the province of Ontario's math curriculum. I'm still really bad at math. Like I'm fine to do arithmetic really quickly in my head, but trigonometry, probability, like calculus, like I was just so bad at those. And I like, it was a lot. It was like my parents, I definitely lived in a lie for the last 2 years of high school when I lived in Canada. Like I doctored all of my report cards because I mean they couldn't.
They would have killed you.
That-
Like literally, they would have. Like Asian parents.
They would have killed me. There was no way. Like the lowest score I was ever allowed or I ever felt safe showing them, and even then safe is in asterisks because even then I would still get punished and yelled, but maybe they won't beat me for it. So like I would, like the lowest I would get, like I would be allowed is like an 85. And lower than that is like it's like a shame worse than like if I had just killed somebody. So like I worked really hard to get better. I took like extra tutoring to get better, like and I worked so hard to get a 76 in math, in grade 11 math, and I was like I felt ashamed and horrible, but I just realized like maybe it's just not for me, or maybe the teacher was, like, I don't know, or just maybe I'm just bad at math. And then in university, I I had a lot of personal issues in the first year, dealing with mental health issues, and I almost flunked out of the first year. And then after that, I actually focused on doing well and studying English. It's really hard because you have to read so much every single week, and
Yeah.
you write so much, and
Mm.
it's really dense reading material. It's really, especially if I'm taking a philosophy course, or a cultural studies course where you're reading you know Adorno, or you're reading Walter Benjamin, or Nietzsche, where it's
That's dense. Yeah.
or Heidegger, stuff I have to read the same sentence 10 times to understand what the fuck they're even talking about. And it was challenging. I think I graduated okay. I could get into master's, no problem, but it took a lot of hard work, and but I still partied. I definitely still partied.
Yeah. It's just same. Like I basically got zeros. I didn't care anymore. I just told my dad I'm gonna just fucking leave my home and become a hobo. 'Cause, I literally got zeros. I literally I even got suspended once for throwing a book at the teacher because I was like, fuck you, man, fuck you, you fucking suck.
Was this in university or
No, high school.
in high school?
But I just got lucky. I got into uni. I don't even know how. Anyway, Australia's a joke. Regan probably knows. But yeah, you've talked man, that just sounds like you went really the less path less taken. You got to music, then you toured China and stuff, yeah, and
Yeah,
that's so rare.
I know it's you don't really meet a lot of Chinese people in the West, in the diaspora. That's I mean, now I do, because I think because I'm quite vocal about issues regarding anti-Asian racism.
Yeah.
And, I've publicly declared myself a communist, and people, I've built more and more of a following, especially among Asian diaspora dance music fans. So I've met way more of those people. But growing up, I didn't know anybody like this. I was always kind of doing my own thing, really passionate about things that I was into. But I felt quite alone. Pretty much until university. Nobody in high school, even people who were white or not Asian, were not really listening to the music that I was into. You can definitely tell that I picked.
What was it? What?
So yeah, what were you listening to at high school?
I mean, it wasn't even anything major, but I was listening to I don't know, Radiohead.
Hip hop or?
Really?
Oh, okay.
No one was into Radiohead in your high school.
I was listening to Radiohead, listening to Pulp, listening to I don't know, Supergrass, a lot of British bands.
That's all Britpop. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Stone Roses, not Stone Temple Pilots. Yeah. Stone Roses. But it was also, you have to remember, it was 2000. I graduated high school in 2003. I went to a very, so I do want to talk about this experience, is that I moved from a very white Albany, very white high school in the States, to the most Asian neighborhood I'd ever been to outside of China. We lived in this township, or this suburban city called Markham. It's about 35 minutes outside of Toronto. It's part of the greater metropolitan area, but it's I went to high school, and first of all, Markham has the largest Chinese mall outside of China.
What?
You may have heard of Pacific Mall. I don't know if
yeah.
Pacific Mall is the largest Chinese mall outside of China. And it just I would say about half, maybe even more than half of my high school were Chinese. But I didn't understand any of them, because around that time in in Markham and in Canada in general, most of the Chinese immigrants were Southern Chinese or from Hong Kong.
Oh my God, same. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they would always talk to me in Cantonese, just assuming that I spoke it, which annoyed me. And I would be like, no, but like even then I felt very like kind of isolated. So like I didn't know any Mandarin people, like mainlanders, and even when I started to make more and more Chinese friends, all of my Chinese friends in university are from Hong Kong,
Yes.
or they're from like Fujian, or they're
Right.
from like
Dongguan, just like that
Dong-
area.
yeah. So I don't speak a word of Cantonese. I think I know pokai, which is like a swear word. It means like fall in the street and die or something. I don't, someone explain it to me. And
丟你老母, I think.
what's that mean?
I know it's a swear word. And that's like
Oh, it's a swear word?
which is just ni hao, but like I think in Canada.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely developed like a reverse xenophobia towards them because I often felt like they looked down on me because I didn't speak Cantonese and I was from the mainland.
Same.
And I kind of hated them, and I hate the way Cantonese sounds. I find it unpleasant to listen to.
Oh, I used to say that and get bashed.
Yeah, I mean, I will probably but like as I got older, like I changed that way of thinking. And like it's very funny because when I go to China, it's like a status, a sign of status, higher status if you can understand or speak Cantonese. At least like when I would see my uncles in Wuhan, when we'd go to karaoke, everybody would make a fuss over
Cantonese song. Yeah.
who can sing in Cantonese and can speak.
The Eason Chen song or something. Oh God.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like now as I got older, I got into like Hong Kong cinema, and I love Fei Wong, and I listen to her music, and I love.
But she's a Beijing.
Yeah, but like she can, like I listen to her canto pop songs, and I love the way it sounds. I think Cantonese sounds really good in music, like when you sing it.
You speak, it's different, yeah.
And it sounds good when you rap it. Whereas
100%.
I really hate the sound of Mandarin in rapping. When I hear a Mandarin rap, I just feel like this visceral, like, oh, why does it sound like that?
I think they're not doing it correctly, or something's off with the rhythm, because it sounds very sort of cheesy, like a children's rap every time.
I think the problem is that Mandarin, compared to other languages, like for example, like I think Japanese sounds awesome rapped, and I think Korean sounds really awesome rapped. It's only Mandarin that I feel like sound, and I think part of it is because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Japanese and in Korean and in Cantonese as well, I think there's short vowel sounds and then there's also long vowel sounds. Whereas like in Mandarin, I feel like every word is monosyllabic, and we don't have something like in English where you say like cute, where like there's like that like short sound at the end and the first one is long. Like in Mandarin, everything is da 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 da. Right. And so I find that gives it less of it's less conducive for like a musical tonality to having it wrapped. I don't know.
It's different though, because I'm not a linguistics expert, but I know that in when Taiwanese Mandarin people they rap in Taiwanese Mandarin, which is the same, just Taiwanese accent. It sounds actually pretty all right, and I don't know how.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. I listened to this one rapper. He's a bit underground. Soft Lipper, you know him?
Sorry?
Soft Lipper. He's like sort of like Nujabes. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know.
He's rap. He really fits Mandarin for some reason. But for some reason, when I go to the mainland and hear the rap, it's just like they're trying really hard to copy an American sound, but sort of put it into Mandarin and sort of develop their own kind of sort of style. That's what really annoys me. It's just, I as I said, the westernization of China has just gone very like consumeristic. It's not very natural. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get it because, rap is something that came from the West, and I understand this desire to want to update it, to make it more relevant for a global market. It's all business at the end of the day. These artists want to market themselves to the international world. And when you go to Korea, which the pop scene there is so big, and when I was there, Big Bang was really popular. This was I miss the BTS kind of time. When I lived there, it was like Big Bang, Super Junior, and
Girls' Generation.
Dongbang Shinki. I don't know how to say that.
DBSK, yeah.
Yeah. Those are the big groups in Girls' Generation and Wonder Girls. And when they'd rap, it's all very Western sounding. It sounded like American pop music.
Yeah. Especially Big Bang, just like a copy of African American culture.
Totally, a big time. Some of their songs sound like their older songs sound like 90s R&B, which I definitely enjoyed. But yeah, it's definitely not the most unique, and they definitely copy from, which is
but they do it well, at least. So
they do it well. I think Koreans are very excuse this a generalization, but they're very disciplined in the way that there are also lots of problems in the entertainment industry in terms of labor issues and issues of abuse at young trainees. But overall, the way they train artists, the way they build them up, they're very well-rounded. They work really, really hard, and they seem to know how to to take something from the West and then restructure it so that it is still Korean but westernized. Yeah.
I mean, it's just I get what you mean. Yeah. So when you did your music, and you said you toured in China, I'm really curious about this. What was touring in China like? Just yeah.
It was great. I mean, I went with my boyfriend, and it was kind of it was a 5-week long tour because I also played in Korea and Japan. I played 6 shows in China, and he went with me. He had never been, and we were kind of going to also introduce him to my family, my extended family. And I stayed with our family in Xi'an, where that was the first show. The first show I played was in Shenzhen. Never mind. It was at this club called Oil, and that was my favorite show. And I really liked Shenzhen a lot. I would live there 100%, and the club is really great. The food is really good there. And then I don't know how to describe it. I mean, people.
Was it like the Wuhan pool party? That's on my mind now when I think of dance music
I feel
party.
I feel like that's a very different world. I feel like that is more like EDM, whereas I don't really play that. I the world that I occupy is sort of the underground, indie kind of, house and techno that's very popular in Europe and parts of the US. And it's definitely increasing in popularity in China because of certain scenes in Shanghai, for example. There's a really amazing kind of experimental label based in Shanghai, and there's been an increase in Chinese artists for sure, but the clubs they're just dark clubs. They look not very different from European clubs, except everyone is Asian, although not everyone, depending on where you play. In Chengdu and in Shenzhen and Xi'an and Hangzhou, I would say most of the audience were Chinese. But in Beijing and Shanghai, it was kind of more mixed. There were a lot of more like expats, white presenting people.
Were you at the Mao Live House or something in Beijing?
Which?
The Mao Live House or something? I can't remember what it was called.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah.
I played in a club called Ciel, which is like the big like the techno club in Beijing. And then
What's the name again? Sorry?
招待
招待. Oh, okay.
招待 like you know 招待客人
Oh, okay.
yeah 招待 and then I played in Club All, which is in Shanghai, which is it's owned by a British expat, I think, but he's been living in China for maybe 30 years in Shanghai. And he owned a club before that. And I essentially got introduced to him through a Chinese artist who's like, you know, I really look up to him. His name is Xing, and he is Taiwanese, but when I met him, he was living in Shanghai, and he kind of commutes between the two places. And he's very like, he inspires, I think, a lot of us because he's very unabashedly Chinese. Like he did an entire album based on, it escapes me. He's actually way more educated about Chinese like literature than I am, but it's,
is it?
How
do you pronounce his name? Sorry, Xing.
Yeah, it's like it's TZU.
Yep.
SING, and his he was born in Malaysia, and then you know spent. I think he grew up in Singapore, but he's Chinese. You know, there's a lot of Chinese people that live in Malaysia and in Singapore. And the album, he did an album called 东方不败.
Yes,
and,
I was just looking at that. Yeah.
Yes. So, and it's based on that character who's like, named 东方不败, right? Like where he's a cross-dresser, maybe? Is it?
I think so. I'm not as well versed in this. This is actually quite interesting. Yeah. So I'm just looking at it right now.
Yeah. So like we're friends. We played together in Australia at Unsound the year that I DJ'd when I toured in Australia, and like he took me out for Hot Pot when I played in Shanghai, and he like essentially connected me with the show. And you know, all the Chinese people, the few, like the ones that I can count on one hand, kind of know each other, but there's not really any, like there's only in the last couple of years that I've started to see more people that are from the mainland rather than from, you know, like Hong Kong or else.
Yeah. It's like it's same as when I was in high school. Like it's only around sort of 2010-ish when I started seeing a lot of Mandarin speakers come to Melbourne. Like there were like 2 hot pot restaurants in all of Melbourne before that. Now there's like 1,000. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So did you find touring China, is it so can you make good money doing that, or is it more for the love of the art?
I mean, my fees are definitely lower in China than in other places. You know, artists like me, and in general, I think we work on there's no set price to book me. It's like my agent will kind of put together like a fee based on, you know, the size of the club and how many tickets they expect to sell based on my draw and what have you. But you know, like it was good. Otherwise I wouldn't have gone.
And did you find that tour that your audience grew, like your Chinese audience, or?
I mean, it's hard to say because I don't know how to even track that.
They're separated, like it's like a wall-to-wall.
Our internet is separated, and also beyond that, although I'm working on it, but my Chinese reading skills are really bad, like really bad. You know, I did Chinese work until I was 16, and you know, I can still read. I would say about 50% of things. And I can write about 50% as well. But I have like a grade 2, like grade 3, like Chinese. comprehension ability. So when I click on a website and it's all in Chinese, like my eyes just become like, I don't know how to say it in English, which is ironic. I feel like my eyes become like huala, like I don't know what you call that. It's like my eyes blur and I'm like I can't identify any words, and it just becomes like pictures to me. So I get quite like I have no idea like what in terms of my audience there even is in China, but I do have a lot of Chinese diaspora fans that grew up over the years, and they write to me, and you know they're living in Germany, or living in the States, or living in like Australia or whatever. But we all pretty much always communicate in English. Funnily enough, it was only after I started tweeting about China that now I'm getting people who find my music and they talk to me in Chinese. So that is like a positive, because you know I always want more.
Is there like a lot of Chinese influence in your music?
I would say so. I mean, didn't really grow up like, I don't know how to describe, maybe you can relate, but like I mentioned it earlier, I felt like growing up I was very whitewashed. I was definitely like a self-hating Chinese diaspora person. I was like not like, I wouldn't say I was like proud to be Chinese, and I definitely held this like internalized view that, you know, things from China were backwards, or like were not cool, or like, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But as I feel like the last 10, 20 years of my life where I've really developed a lot of my philosophies regarding, you know, politics, regarding identity, regarding racism, and sort of like my culture and my heritage. And I've changed a lot in that regard. You know, up until this point, the only Chinese thing I was ever really into was I was briefly obsessed with Jay Chou for a year when I was like 20. When I went to China with my dad, I listened to Jay Chou when I was there. I was like, oh, this is great. I love it. But that was the only experience I had with, and oh yeah, and I watched a Chinese drama and I was obsessed with it.
Which
it was
one?
called 橘子红了. I don't know, but Zhou Xun was in it, and she's a pretty famous Chinese actress.
Yeah, she's very famous. Yeah.
And it was basically the plot was, you know, it was during the Qing Dynasty, I think, and she was married to this like very austere like patriarch, and then she fell in love with his brother. It was a big mess, and you can infer what happens rest. But 橘子红了 just means like literally that like the orange has turned red. I don't know what that means, or what the if there's like some kind of proverb or idiom associated with it that I'm just
it's like the orange ripens, basically, I guess.
Yeah, the orange has ripened. Yeah. And so those were the only thing, like I was pretty divorced from that part of my life. And it was only, I moved to Korea because I wanted to, you know, be closer to, you know, Asian culture. And I went to China a lot, like quite a few times when I was there. My grandparents were still alive. I wanted to visit them. And the more I went, and also the more I read of like, it's interesting that like, it was only after I became more sympathetic to socialism that I learned to not self-hate. Isn't that crazy? Is that like,
oh fuck,
often felt this like anti-communism thing is such a pervasive part of Western culture that we kind of internalize it, but it poisons everything. It's not just we hate the government. It's like everything about like China, you know, for a lot of kids like me, you know, we kind of don't have anything to do with it. And maybe that was just my own experience. I'm sure lots of other people, you know, Susing being a great example, who are really proud of their Chinese culture and know a lot about it. but don't like the government, the Chinese government. But it was, at least for me, my personal journey. And only after I started making music, I put out my first record in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And that year, actually, I don't know if you have seen the cover of my first record, but my first record is called Electrical Encounters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a picture of me.
Oh shit.
Oh, really? I thought it was like
Yeah.
some wuxia like movie clip.
No, that's me. When I was still living in China, my parents made me do this thing on my 6th birthday, where they took me to a photo studio, and there's like a whole series. There's even one of me where I look like a comrade, like where like a child that's dressed like.
Dude, that's cool.
So I just love this picture, and I thought this was like, a very personal record. It's my first record, and I was kind of wanting to give a shout out to how, like, I loved Notorious B.I.G. when I was growing up, and his first record, I think, was like a picture of himself as a baby.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wanted to do something like that where like I felt like I owe a lot to my parents and I owe a lot to my Chinese upbringing that I'm even able to make music. And so even though there was nothing really Chinesey in terms of musically on that record, it is a part of me. And then from that point, I think every subsequent record that I've made has been more, I think, open about like playing with things that are Chinese. Like, one of my favorite sounds is the kwai bar. Do you know what that is?
It was originally like used for like Chinese sort of storytellers, kind of. It's kind of hard to describe.
Well, my dad says rap was invented in China.
Oh, because of that? That's not... Okay, I guess sort of. It's like a sort of rap storytelling. Yeah.
I mean, my dad's very Han chauvinist in that regard. But his idea was that, like, people would recite limericks and play this like clapper made from bamboo, and they would like and just shake it. It's sort of like, it sounds like almost like a snare, but it's halfway between a snare and like a snap almost. I find kwaiban, it has like a very sharp like sound.
How do you spell that?
I'm not sure it's even...
Uaiban. I always add an R at the end because I speak in that more Chinese way, but it's technically pronounced kwaiban. But yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, so like I made a sample pack for Splice last year, and I sampled and I used that sound to create a new sound. And I try to use Chinese percussion a lot. I made this piece that I'm working on right now. I wanted to, so in Ableton, you can sample pretty much any instrument, and you can put an instrument sound into this thing called a sampler or a simpler, and you can play it like an instrument on a keyboard. So I could sample something like a guzheng, for example, and I loved the sound of a, is that how you say it? Guzheng or guzhen? It's like guzheng.
Don't ask me. I'm just like you. I'm like a third grade Chinese person.
And I sample a lot of Chinese like instruments. One of my early tracks is called Erhu Jam.
Erhu, yeah, another Chinese. It's like a sort of like a lute with like 2 strings, kind of.
Yeah, it's like a primitive violin, essentially. It's like a string instrument, but it has a very melancholy sound, which I always loved. And my second record is called
pipa?
100 Flowers. What?
Do you ever done a pipa? Pipa. It's like the actual guitar looking one.
No, I haven't. But I'm gonna add it to my list. I'm always on YouTube looking for people playing Chinese instruments and like using that sound and resampling it and writing music with the sound. Like when you hear my song Erhu Jam, it doesn't even sound like Erhu at all. Because like, I mean, the idea is to make it sound almost unrecognizable.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, you're
Um,
modernizing it and making it to adapt to our current.
yeah. And so that's like kind of how I'm, and I don't know if you caught that, but my second record is called 100 Flowers. I was
Is that political?
that
Or?
no, it's not a political record at all. I just was reading about that campaign at the time, and I had written a song that I thought was like really playful, and it reminded me of like I I think because of my upbringing and because of the pieces that I played when I was growing up, I think Chinese kids, even when they live in the West, all Chinese kids play very play pieces that are very commonly found in Chinese piano education, but not in the West. So for example, like stuff like Richard Kleiderman, I've never heard of anyone play that outside of China. I think having that exposure, I think there is a sensibility to how I write melodies that sound kind of Chinesey. I can't describe it. It's almost inexplicable. When I tell other people, they're like, what are you talking about? But like when the song that I made, it just really made me think of music I would hear when like I associate it with like going to school when you're like in grade school, like grade 1, going to do like the morning calisthenics in front of the school. Like all kids had to do that. You know, you'd wear your
广播体操.
Yeah.
Where like your little, it's like how Chinese people really like Kenny G, but I've never met a Western fan of Kenny G.
Exactly. Yeah, these like weird things that are like only popular in China, but are American, like are from the West, but
and
nobody.
That stupid Mask movie with Drew Carey, was it not Drew?
No, Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey, yeah. Oh god, why is that popular? Like it seems to be, and there's a lot of things that are popular in China. It makes no sense.
That's funny because that's the very first movie I ever saw in the movie theater in America with my family.
Oh, see, told you. Like, guys would just love that movie, and I'm like, that movie.
Loved it. I still love that movie.
Oh,
yeah, it's
sorry.
one of Jim Carrey's best.
Yeah.
that movie is funny. I don't know. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. It is funny, but like it's talked about. Like when I was looking at my aunt, she's like, "Oh, I saw the best movie. It's this guy. He becomes a green guy." I'm like, "The mask." He's like, "Yeah, it's so good." I was like, "Yeah, it's alright, but like not that good."
So yeah, I don't know. I definitely try to pay respect to my culture a lot, and learn more about like Chinese music. And whether it's ancient or contemporary, but like I think when I was growing up, I often like thought that it was kind of lame. Like my parents would always sing the same songs to me, like you know, the one that's really popular in China, it's like an opera, but it's also like a story about like these lovers. It's like about star-crossed lovers, but they can't.
Or some shit.
Yeah, they turn into butterflies or whatever.
Yeah, 2 butterflies.
Yeah, so that piece is like so like I can hear it. I will never get it out of my head. And when I was growing up, it was like my parents really shoved that down my throat, you know, and like I was just like, I don't like this. It's really corny. And I think for the longest time, I just associated Chinese music with like either patriot music, like that was about like
corny love songs,
you know, loving your country, or you know, music that was like, you know, Peking opera, which like my grandparents would listen to. Found it like unlistenable, or like freaking, you know, pop music, which I like, I mean, is so saccharine. You know, I find most of the stuff that's popular that people enjoy singing at the karaoke, I'm like, it's really corny. It's like, you know, love songs. I don't listen to stuff like that here.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the music in Chinese taxis is that very painful
ballads, right?
Love ballads.
It's all ballads, yeah.
Yeah, ballads.
And a lot of the bars seem to play that as well. When I visited China, I was never able to find cool underground music. So I think
But there is. And
there's a lot, actually.
I only discovered it when I was living in in Korea, which is like, you know, but just having that geographical closeness, like, you know, I definitely, I was an English teacher, so I did go to bars in Korea, surprise, surprise. And sometimes they booked bands from China. So I discovered like a really cool shoegaze scene in Beijing. There's a band called Car Sick Cars. Maybe you've heard of them. But I was so excited to see them. I had we had a Chinese Korean barbecue after, and I talked to them in Chinese. I was so excited. I had not seen Chinese really in like a really long time. There is like, I think Beijing has a really cool, I think more like rock and experimental scene, and Shanghai is more like you know, I think dance music is more popular in Shanghai than in Beijing. And there's this like, and there's like record labels in Shanghai that are getting like success and praise like internationally. And so that's been really nice to see, because like before that, I'd never even really seen, you know, much representation.
Beijing really has that underground sort of indie vibe, especially when most of the music scene seems to be settled in like the old town. Sort of like it's like this aesthetic where you got the modern, then you got the old hutongs going along the side.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
It's cool. And now that I'm older and, you know, I've unlearned a lot of these toxic ideas, I feel like I was so wrong about, I mean, I think Chinese instruments are some of the most unique and beautiful instruments like ever. And are like, and the influence of, for example, something like a guzheng is like, you know, there are versions of it throughout Asia. In Korea, it's called a kayagum, and then they call it a kodo in Japan.
Oh, in English, it's called a ziffer.
So like
now Rika knows what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's all these like, we were definitely on a tip in terms of like the percussion, like the cool, like there's really cool like clave sounds or clave sounds. It's like kind of like a ping, kind of like percussive. Really like huge gongs and stuff like that. And when I was in Asia, I was like, you know, whenever I'm touring, I always have a recording device handy. I record, you know, background noise, street din and things like that, which I can later like resample or use in some way. And I went to a Buddhist temple, and I just loved like, because they're using traditional instruments as well, and I could sit there all day and just listen to them sing. And like Chinese music has a particular way, like where the melodies go a certain way. It's like how like different cultures have a different scale. There's like definitely a very Chinese kind of scale, and when you hear music, it sounds like really familiar and like nostalgic in a way. And so it's been nice to kind of get in touch with that part of me and embrace it. And, you know, I released a song this year that like, I mean, I don't know if I'm getting into trouble revealing all of my sample sources. I don't want to get sued. But definitely like
talking about that before you came on, actually.
Whatever. But you know, I worked with like Fei Wong, like one of her songs, I sampled the way she's in Cantonese. It's called, I'm gonna pull it up because I don't remember. Demo.
I mean, Chinese is the music scene. It used to be really heavily controlled by the government originally during the empire, like the imperial dynasties. There used to be actually an actual government thing called the Music Bureau, where they can produce music for the government, and it's for like thousands of years. Really? That's how it worked. Yeah, so China had a very serious scene, but the music was usually done for ritualistic values or for entertainment when they were drinking alcohol. So it's very, how do I say, male-dominated. Because, you know, when you have parties, people sitting around like drinking the rice wine. And it's also a lot of the music, it's based on poetry, basically. They recite poetry like Song Ci. and it's
Mhm.
very, very depressing. Oh, everything in Chinese just sounds so depressing. Yeah.
I sent you the name
I
of this.
may. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's like how do I say I may in Chinese? It's like sort of like love, but it's like a crush kind of feel. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and it's just her voice is beautiful, and it also was like the song that had a bit without any instruments. So like oftentimes what I end up sampling, if I sample a vocal, um, it's really just dependent on like, can I isolate the vocal from the instrumentation? Because I don't want the instrumentation, I just want the vocal. You can't really find like acapellas for me. So this one has like an opening bit where it's just her voice and nothing else, and it's really nice. And I didn't really listen to her music. I got to know her through movies. I really like Wang Jiawei, like Wong Kar-wai's movies, and like a lot of, I think, Asian diaspora people, we all love Wong Kar-wai movies, and I got to know her from there. And yeah,
Yeah. What
it's
about that song Zasui? I think Zasui.
Zasui. What kind
Oh, that's what
of
it is.
Zasui is the Mandarin word for chop suey. So basically, I made my record that just came out this year. The concept was, in dance music, there's a lot of discussion about cultural appropriation, about who is allowed to sample from where. And, sampling is I think, one of the, without sampling, there would, like, electronic music came from sampling. It's a sampling culture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think sometimes people get really offended at cultural appropriation, and I understand that, but I don't want them to use that as a reason to like do away with sampling, because sometimes the conversation does get to a place where it's like, oh, you shouldn't, if you don't have a right to this culture, then you don't get to sample it. And I really think that there's a right way to appreciate something and to use it in a way, and there's the wrong way to do it. And I wanted to show that there is a way to do it that is respectful, and that is not removing context from, and still also using samples that mean something personal to me. I think a lot of times people use samples carelessly. They're like, I get British producers sending me albums that are like, oh, I really think you'll dig this. And like every track just sounds like I don't know how to explain it. It sounds like if you got like a CD from a tourist like agency where they were introducing you to music of China, music,
Yep.
Oh, so what a
music.
Westernist view of China is.
Yeah,
Like,
so they'll send me
like that kind of crap.
yeah, exactly. They'll send me stuff that sounds like they sampled like a MIDI thing from like someone sent me a release that was literally every track was like a different culture that they had sampled from, where like this is the Indian song, and then this is the Japan song, and then this is like the, I don't know, Persian or like African, I don't know.
Peruvian pipes.
Yeah, it's a lot. No bagpipes, because they never ever sample from white people. They only, so like the optics just looks really uneven. People complain about cultural appropriation because there's a power imbalance where it's like predominantly white people sampling from people of color. And as a person of color, I wanted to show that you could sample, that I'm going to sample from white people, but I'll also sample from non-white cultures, and like really interrogate where my samples are coming from, what they mean, what the lyrics are saying. There's like a lot of instances in dance music where some techno producer sampled a Muslim call to prayer and a techno beat to it, and then played it in like Qatar or like in like somewhere like where it's like a lot of Muslims live there, and then it's like get called out for it, and it's like, oh, how can you get mad at me for that? And it's like, well, I mean, you're not respectful of the fact that this is sacred music for people. You can't hear that in the club. That is like haram, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, I mean, especially a lot of music
It's
actually originates from ritual and religion in the
right.
Eastern sphere.
Yes.
So
And so I
but it's
always
also it's just cheap and it's lazy as well.
yeah,
Like
it's lazy. It's also musically lazy because they just want like a cheap trick to make their song sound exotic or cool, interesting. But like
yeah, it's orientalizing basically. Like, look at these Muslims; they're doing their Muslim thing. Yeah,
I
exactly,
mean,
it's like, oh,
10,
I like the sound of this, but not like thinking more deeply about like, oh, just because I like the sound of this, what does this mean to someone else? Like, what does it mean to someone who looks different from me and all of those things? So like, 杂碎, I called it that. It's not like, I mean, there are Chinese samples on it, but there are also Japanese samples on it. There's American samples on it. There's, places, there's like Vietnamese samples. There's like, things from all over. And
so I also saw you been sampling from films and stuff as well. It's not just
yes,
music.
yes, I do. I mean, I love movies. I watch a lot of movies, and they're definitely a source of inspiration for me. And like, yeah, I think there, I just feel like there has to be a way that you could do this where people understand what you're trying to do, and they understand that it was done in good faith.
Mm.
And so that's why I put out an artist statement sort of explaining what was the process behind it. And every single sample on this record, I personally acquired. Like, it didn't come from a sample pack. I didn't download a world music CD or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's like things, oh, I went to this country and I bought this record and locals recommended it to me and told me what it was about and what the song is about before I just chucked it on there. And so it's called Chop Suey because it's really like a potpourri of like so many different random stuff in there, in the hopes that I could create like my own world from that.
Mm.
And a chop suey dish is, what is chop suey? It's like a mixture of like a bunch of crap in one big dish.
Never actually had it. Never.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I never had chop suey either, so I had to look it up. I was like, what is chop suey? Why does System of a Down have a song called Chop Suey? And chop suey is a dish in American Chinese cuisine consisting of like meat, eggs, a bunch of different vegetables, and a lot of times it's like what people just throw what they have in their house,
Yeah.
and then kind of like put it all together. So, tap sui, I don't know how to say it in Cantonese. It literally means miscellaneous leftovers.
Yeah.
Oh, and I didn't want to use chop suey. I don't speak Cantonese. I thought it was more honest to use, za sui,
Yeah.
use Mandarin. And that's the song that's sort of like everybody's favorite from this record. And I really like it as well.
Yeah, it seems to be the most popular one from what I can see. And Regan.
I mean, on the Bandcamp page, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. We've recorded for quite a while. It's getting quite late. Is it over there in Canada?
Yeah, it's 10 p.m., but I keep really odd hours, so
Okay, that's good. So we don't want to keep you up or anything.
No, don't worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about 88 Rising? Like, did you guys meet up with them or?
It's actually funny. They actually asked me to do a mix for them on their
Oh shit.
Yeah, they started this new radio thing. I don't know how I feel about it. It's like a very different audience, and they get accused a lot of being quite male centric and also being a little bit appropriative the optics of an Asian collective that is mostly centered around rap music, I think is a little bit, makes some people pause, I think. I don't know how I feel about that aspect of it, but I have some friends that have worked with them before, and I'm not too sure about it. Maybe you guys could help me. What do you think? What do you?
I mean, did you play? Yeah.
So it is the few songs that I've listened from that scene. I get very like sort of white people doing hip hop in the 80s, like Beastie Boys, and kind of with the like, you know, it is very masculine sort of dudes. It's a lot of it like fuck bitches sort of stuff. Like I think hip hop has kind of moved on from that in a way. So and it is weird. I mean,
it just seems like a little bit disingenuous. Like they're acting in a way. Like there's this one song that I did like though. What's that guy's? What was that? I'm trying to remember. Oh God, I don't remember what it was called. But it was like
Who was the artist?
I don't remember either.
Yeah.
I really suck at that. But yeah, I mean, I think that what people like when they hear music, people talk a lot about authenticity, about like what is like genuine and real about you. And I think when you live in the West as a minority, I think Chinese people often end up adopting more of like all Chinese people I know love hip hop, you know, like we kind of gravitate to that kind of subculture. When I was growing up, you know, I was friends with like other non-white people. I mean, I was friends with white people as well, but I often felt in a school where there was nobody really that like there was one other Chinese kid, his name was Peter Chen, and we had nothing in common. And so like I generally just hung out with black kids. And if I wanted to hang out with like people who were not white, who were minority, you know, I felt like we had more common ground in many ways. And that's a phenomenon that happens a lot, like in sort of the Five Eyes countries, you know, where like different groups of minorities kind of gravitate toward each other. They hang out with each other, and it in turn influences how we present ourselves and the things that we become interested in. So, but at the same time, you know, you don't need to be rapping about like fucking bitches because it just seems really like, yeah.
Up to that point, like that the most famous song, one of them was like "Made in China" or something by High Brothers. Because that's what a Western person's view of China is: cheap goods, made in China. Even the song itself is like, oh, Chinese rap, what's Chinese hip hop, what's that? And like, it's that's why I think it got popular, because they think that was Chinese people being authentic, talking about making cheap goods. And
I know this song.
I thought that song is quite tongue in cheek. It's like they're almost aware of.
This is what I think of us. Yeah.
I mean, so I am just seeing this video for the very first time. Are they Chinese?
Yeah, Sichuan, all Sichuan boys.
No, I mean, like, do they live in China, or are they like
Chengdu?
Oh, interesting.
It's fully Chengdu, but like all the rap.
Actually, Chengdu is one of the coolest places I've ever been to in China.
I would retire there if I could.
Yeah, like when I played in Chengdu, I like, oh my God, I don't even know. I maybe I'm being too honest in this. But a fan gave me weed when I was in Chengdu.
Jeez, that's risking his life.
She's from Australia. She spoke to me in Australian English, but she was Chinese.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, I live in Canada. I'm a heavy weed smoker. I smoke weed pretty much like every day. And the only times I don't smoke weed are when I'm in a country where I can't. And
I'm dying to go back to China because I need a tolerance break.
Yeah, I mean, like I took a break. I didn't enjoy that experience because I was so paranoid. I couldn't even really enjoy it. And I couldn't do it over there. get caught. They actually stopped me when I was leaving the country to go to Korea, at the the border, and I was like, oh my god, I'm
They
fucked.
found me.
Yeah, you
He's
found me. It was fine. It was not a big deal, and they just asked to look at my passport again.
Dude, like I smoked in behind a back alley once. Because I hang out with a lot of African people when I was in Beijing, and for some reason, it works like this: the Africans deal they usually do hash instead of weed in Beijing, and all the buyers are basically hipster white people who study there. It's actually weird how that works. It's like they're trying to reestablish a system, and I was so scared because a bunch of Bowen walked past. They're like, "Hey, your cigarette smells weird," and I'm like, "Yeah."
And they can tell now. They know. They know. Like, I mean, when I was younger, going to China, I just assumed nobody knew what it smelled like, because it just wasn't very common. I think during the previous administrations, they were way more lax about it, and people didn't really like give a shit about it.
Yeah.
But Xi Jinping really hates drugs. He's like very, very conservative.
Like, Jackie Chan's son, he got busted. Now he's like, isn't he like banned from all these stuff now, like the entertainment industry and stuff?
Yeah, but I mean, that's not unique to China. When I was living in in Korea, there were several high-profile scandals involving Korean pop stars who had smoked weed. And like the amount of like theater that they had to go through to publicly apologize to netizens was just like, I mean, that made me like roll my eyes because like in this regard, I do not agree with how things are at all in Asia with like regards to it's such a conservative view of.
There's a trauma as well. Like my dad always talks about, it's like napian, like opium.
Yeah.
Where you're gonna be like the opium people. You're going to be addicted and the white people will take control of you. And I'm like, anyway.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I understand why people wouldn't like weed, because weed has like, it also makes you sleepy and lazy and like kind of like happy, like dumb happy in a way.
Yeah.
So I get that. But, you know, it's also not opium. And for a culture that really prides itself on being very scientific and being very like, you know, facts above all else is a very unscientific view of marijuana. You know, that, you know, I live in a country where it's legal. It helps a lot of people with all sorts of medical conditions. And I don't agree with like this sort of tough on drugs. I mean, like tough on drugs. A war on drugs, I find that is like we're just internalizing Western ideas.
I mean, Baijiu, Chinese Baijiu, that 56% stuff is very toxic to the body. Like,
it's
my
very
uncle
toxic.
Died from liver cancer because he drank it every day.
I mean,
that's way more dangerous. Yeah.
I'm worried about my dad because he drinks Baijiu every meal, and he never used to do that, and it was only in the after his second marriage, and then last like 10 years he started to do that more and more. And his father he died an alcoholic.
That's how dangerous it is.
It's very dangerous. And even when I go to China, I don't drink Baijiu. I don't like the taste of it.
I mean, it's fine if you don't drink it every day, but when you're drinking 60% alcohol every day, you're gonna die eventually.
If my uncles ask me to, you know, gumbe or whatever, I'll drink it. You know, I'll have a shot.
Respect.
I do feel like it's so strong, and I feel like I'm getting drunk just smelling it. It's so intense. It's like coming into my body. Like you know, I'm not anti-alcohol. I drink for sure. I just think that the culture surrounding over drinking is way more toxic than like weed. You know, when you smoke too much weed, you just fall asleep. When you drink too much alcohol, you know, I've heard of people beating the shit out of their like girlfriends. You know,
accidents.
Car accidents, horrible fights. You know, starting shit with people. It's just not like a positive kind of
No.
effect.
I got told this crazy story about Africans who gave me the hash. They were like, apparently, because the supply chain in China is so hard to get, right? So what they
That's
do
why
is,
it's expensive, right?
yeah,
It's so expensive in China.
yeah. So they trained a bunch of camels who would be able to walk from Mongolia through Russia and to another port to automatically go to like outside somewhere in Beijing and just keep transporting because the police wouldn't stop a camel going through the border or a horse. And I'm like, that sounds really fake. And I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, that's how we get our stuff because, you can't get it. If you have a human, they're going to search. But it's just a random wild horse or like a camel going outside in Mongolia. You can just, I'm like, that sounds really cool if that's true. Yeah.
Wow, that's really crazy that they go through that. Like a camel. Like, there's people not walking with the camel. It's just the camel.
No, because if you walk with the camel, the police will check you. But if it's just a random wild animal, like, just carrying a bunch of bags on his back, that's normal.
That's crazy. That's so wild. That's very inventive.
Yeah.
I didn't know camels were that smart.
Well, they probably are. I'm not sure. It sounds like a lie, but he was really adamant. And then his mates will back him up. And I was like, you're joking me. He's like, no, this is actually legit how we make our living here. I'm like, oh.
When did you live in China?
I had two spurts. One when I was 18, because I was like, man, I'm going to become a tradie. And I started to get into uni. I got into it somehow. Anyway, that's when for like a few months. Then I went back and I was 2017, 18, worked for China Daily and at unis.
Oh, you got a job working for the like newspaper there.
Yeah, but they were weird, man. Everyone there just wanted to migrate to America. So they really didn't want to write anything
really
negative
curious
about
that because me and my partner, I've been with him for 10 years. We're like he's like my husband essentially. I mean, he loves China. He's white, but he loves China, and he's in many ways. I feel like I'm indebted to him because like 5 years ago, before I think I had been radicalized or whatever, he would argue with me about how great China was, and I would yell at him and I'd be like, how could you say that? My parents suffered through so much. And they did. There's no denial of that. But it's interesting to see how the dynamics have changed over time. And we've talked about moving to China. If things really don't work out here, it's because of COVID or whatever, we're like, let's go there. And I have experience writing, but I always wondered like how you could get a job not being an English teacher, and still work in China.
Well,
yeah.
Honestly, the English teacher thing is quite alluring because you get paid like 10 or 15 times more than an average person, and you do
Really?
jack all in China. Yeah, I mean, if you're actually qualified and you go to a top school, you can get like paid 30,000 a month, RMB of course, where you got waiters being paid 3,000 a month. So you're living like a king.
That's crazy.
You get treated
so
well.
Insane.
But if you're not qualified, you can still get like 15,000 to 20,000. Working at like a kindergarten.
What do you mean qualified? Like you have a TOEIC or like a TOEFL?
TOEFL, yeah, and you actually have a bachelor's degree. You're not just like some random white dude.
You can get a job teaching English without a university degree?
Yeah, it's illegal, but so many people do it. I'm pretty sure like lower 86 of those like Serpensa people did that.
Wow, that's
so many people who can barely write a sentence in English, like a coherent sentence, teaching English there, or even Russians, Spanish, any person, as long as you're white, you look white enough, because they don't know what you're teaching. Like, so that's why you got so many people graduating from China who did English for like 13 years, and they speak like everything's incorrect because they're being taught by some random Russian guy who doesn't speak English either.
Well, I guess I'm also worried, like, would they hire somebody like me who is Chinese?
You get paid a lot less. So
because of my identity, even though I have experience teaching English.
So I met a guy, he's Chinese dude, 100% Chinese. No accent when he speaks English. He speaks with a English accent because he studied in, he's actually studied in Scotland, but he, learned English in England. He has a master's in education, I think a bachelor's in English, He gets paid only as an assistant teacher because he's Chinese, while his boss is a American guy who has a bachelor's. He gets paid double his amount. Yeah.
Man,
And I'm like, aren't you angry? He's like, nah, that's just how its life is in China. I was like, what? Yeah, anyway.
yeah, see, stuff like that really pisses me off. I don't like that about China. And I think this sort of like internalized like that
Self-loathing, this
white, you must have the best command of English, I think is absurd because like in my experience when I taught in Korea, they don't do that in Korea. I mean, like I also wasn't Korean, but I looked Korean. And by all just like looking at me, there's nothing different between me and a Korean teacher. But I had a Canadian passport. I went to university for English, and I worked in public school, like in a middle school. So like that is a better job than working at a cram school.
A hagwon, yeah.
Yeah, a hagwon. Yeah, exactly. Hagwon is like worse hours, and you get paid less, and you get less vacation.
That's where the unqualified teachers go, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I worked 2 years at a middle school, and all my co-teachers who were Korean loved me. They're like, you're really good at teaching and explaining things because you had to learn English as a second language. You can explain like why things are the way they are. And students retain things a lot better when they understand the rules behind like linguistics.
Yeah.
And I mean, in my opinion, I think a Chinese person who grew up in the West, who speaks unaccented English, but can also speak Chinese, that to me is like so much better than a white English speaker because I can explain to them in Chinese, in my limited Chinese, but I can at least communicate because in my second year teaching English in Korea, I learned Korean. I was taking Korean classes, which is a rarity for English teachers. I don't know if it's like that in China, but it's definitely like that in Korea.
Very rare. No one learns Chinese.
Yeah. But I wanted to learn Korean. I liked the sound of Korean. I watched Korean TV, and I thought it would be an asset. And after that, I would sometimes use Korean when I was teaching class, and it helped me a lot. It also helped me to gain like a common language because it meant that there was something I shared in common with my students. I talked to my students about their favorite dramas or about their favorite variety show or their like favorite comedians, and other people couldn't do that. And in a way, like I had lots of other problems. Like I'm not the most punctual person, so I don't often show up late, but like my school let me get away with that because they're like, you're really good at your job.
Yeah, I mean, I've explained to these kind of feelings to a lot of Chinese schools, but the main issue is Chinese parents themselves won't be happy if they see an Asian or even sometimes a black person teaching English to the kids because they think it's a fake teacher, it's a liar, it's a scam. So there's a lot of lack of education in China itself on this. I even get asked if I can speak English, even though I'm born in Australia, by Chinese people sometimes when I go to China because they assume that I can't speak English properly because I'm Chinese. It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
That's so funny because when I was in China on tour, this was my first time going to China without my family, and nobody would speak to me in Chinese. Like all the promoters, all the club people, my tour manager that I went on this tour with, she was my agent booker. Like she booked a lot of the shows for me. We went together. She spoke Chinese. She was Chinese. But like people would talk to me in English, and I was like, I would talk to them in Chinese, and they're all like, "Oh, whoa, you can speak Chinese." So I feel like I think there's definitely a discrepancy between older generation and younger generation, especially
and possibly the industry as well, like entertainment
exactly.
industry or a progressive industry.
Because the person that asked if I could speak English was actually someone younger than me. Anyway, that's
I mean, I think people in China just have a very outdated perception of identity and what that means in a homogenous society versus a heterogeneous society. Like they just, it's like, but I hope in the experience of this past year, as you know, I've just seen a huge influx of Chinese accounts on Twitter. I can tell that like Chinese people, because of all this like new Cold War shit, they're flooding the Western like kind of online spaces because they want to defend themselves. But I hope that they're also able to gain a better understanding of the West and of what like diaspora people.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the firewalls are really protective. I say Westerners.
Sorry?
It's really protected the Western view. So a lot of people in China don't know the West perception of what China is because of the Great Firewall. But now they're seeing it because so much negativity is just seeping through now. You can't even block it out. And also the Chinese government is allowing it to seep through to, you know, drum up nationalism in a way as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're reporting on it. I'm sure,
Yeah.
I think Chinese government, their MO for as long as I've been alive has been one of diversion, giving like some, I mean, all governments do this, where they give you some kind of boogeyman for you to be upset at so that you wouldn't be critical of your own government.
Yeah.
And I always remembered going to China and staying with my grandmother, and she's always watching, like the TV's always on, you know.
Japanese.
All the dramas are about Japan. All the dramas about the war. And
I mean, at least that's fair in a way, because it's like they never apologize.
Fair, but that's definitely fair. But I'm like, how much can you guys traumatize yourself over and over again?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, don't you get desensitized?
What didn't make sense was the hate on Taiwan a lot, because there's a lot of pro-Chinese Taiwanese, like pro-China Taiwanese people who identify as Chinese, and I'm just like, you know, like around a third to maybe 40% of Taiwanese people in Taiwan, like Chinese people, they identify as Chinese, and they like actually want to join you guys. If you guys just keep hating on them, that's going to make it worse, you know.
Well, I mean, it's a cycle, right? It's a vicious cycle. I went to Taiwan when I lived in Korea. I spent like a vacation. It was a short vacation. It was like 5 days there. I went with my friends, and I was nervous before going there. You know, like I mean, full disclosure, I do support Taiwanese independence, even though I don't like how people conduct themselves online and how much they're ramping up disinformation about China and how much they suck up to Pompeo and the US. I don't like any of that. But fundamentally, I do think, based on the history of Taiwan, I do support their independence. It was an indigenous.
What type of history? Sorry to ask.
Just that, like, there were indigenous people living there.
Yeah, and I mean, I will support independence if it's for the indigenous people. Just for all the Han Chinese grifters.
Yeah,
who are just,
exactly. It really is about context, right? Like, the nationalists went there and then like wiped out so much.
No, it wasn't the nationalists. It was actually the Hokklo people in the 1700s who went there and wiped them out.
Oh, really?
So the people that complain about that's why it's so disgusting, the Taiwanese independence movement. The actual genocidal maniacs, the Hokklos, are blaming on the nationalists. What the nationalists did, because if you look at the voting records, every single indigenous county votes 100% for the Nationalist Party every year. Because they hate the Hokkiens who have committed genocide against them for centuries. And also because of bribes, but yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So that's why I'm telling you, the Western perspective of Taiwanese independence is so disgusting that they portray the Hokklos as being victims. Sure, they were victims in the 50s and 60s because of the nationalist rule, where the indigenous, the nationalists, and the Hakka even ganged up on the Hokklo, who were the majority of the population, because they also collaborated with the Japanese. Anyway, yeah, it really angers me because the Hokklo was like, oh, we're so poor. But the thing is, they have huge gangs beating up mainlanders. They have gangs beating up indigenous people. And they just pretend they're like the most victimized people in all of Taiwan, when in fact they own all the power now. And most of the mainlanders are really returned to mainland, you know, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. Well, thank you for correcting me, because I was misled by what I had read on the internet.
No, but I used to support it as well. Then I found the truth
Yeah,
out. So
I
quick.
always thought like I didn't understand why people voted Kuomintang in Taiwan when Kuomintang is what like wiped out the national like the indigenous population because
Yeah.
like that was yeah. Anyways,
Kuomintang, yeah, didn't do that. They did do some horrible things to the Hoklo people.
yes,
Hoklo people, which is
yeah.
very true. That's why Hoklos
Mhm.
never vote for Kuomintang. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. But
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean, yeah.
very,
So
very deep issue in Taiwan.
yeah, it's
3 or 4
very deep.
generations of
It's
hate
very
and hurt.
yeah. It's the wounds go deep. I do think that like that is something that can't be. I don't know if you can rectify that. And I don't have any like idealist ideas about the future of this bilateral kind of relation. They're really like, yeah.
Well, originally in the 80s and 90s, they were taught that they were the real China. So they need to reinvade mainland. But now, since sort of the later half of the 90s, the 2000s to now, the history books have been changed by America because they realize that Taiwan has no way of defeating China anymore. We need to set up this identity of everyone is actually secretly never been Chinese. And the lack of historical understanding in Taiwan from the young generation is so, how do I say, depressing, because a lot of them think that Chinese people, like they're literally not from China, even though 97% of the population are. It's so depressing. Yeah, and they think like, oh, we actually invented Chinese characters and stuff. It's just like, what's going on here?
Well, I actually I met a Chinese Canadian person recently who had made this comment in passing because I was complaining about how hard it is to read traditional Chinese, and she was saying to me like, well, that's the real Chinese. I mean, that makes more sense than simplified Chinese, because because Chinese is just characters are made up of like smaller characters. It's sort of like how English is made up of like prefixes and suffixes and root words and things like that. She said that because a lot of the language, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but because it had been simplified, that it lost some of the root or like words, and it's no longer as sort of intuitive to write out. That she was trying to say that traditional Chinese is more intuitive than simplified Chinese.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, that may be true, but it's still harder to read.
It's not, it doesn't work. It's just like in Korea where King Sejong made Hangul. So it allowed everyone in Korea to be able to read. It's just like,
yeah, exactly. And he's a hero in Korea because he's able to, I mean, they have one of the highest literacy rates in the world. I learned how to read Korean in a day. You know, it's not hard. You just have to memorize what each of the parts.
It's just an alphabet. Yeah.
It's an alphabet, yeah. And it's interesting sometimes when I talk to Chinese people or like my family, like I think I brought this up with my stepmom, and she kind of like made this like derisive comment about how like, oh, they simplified it, like it's bad. I'm like, well, why is that bad? Why is that a bad thing? Why does like
this is the reason, sorry to interrupt, why that happened is because the reason, one of the main ways to actually move up in China, Chinese society was doing exams in old days. And the one thing that was bringing the working class or the peasant class from going up into society was that they couldn't read because it was so difficult. So basically, by simplifying it, it destroyed the last bastion of the gentry class who were able to control West China gentry scholar class because they were able to read and write. So that's why Mao simplified it. And it really angered a lot of the KMT people or the Taiwanese because a lot of those people, their descendants went to Taiwan. So that was their power base. Yeah.
That's the thing about China, is that traditional Chinese culture is very stratified. It is very elitist and extremely patriarchal. And I think there are some people that in my limited just experience of seeing people come talk about this online. I think there are a lot of people in Taiwan who believe that they're like the one true, like
China.
they're true Chinese people. We're
Yeah,
not.
that's
a
it's
bastardized
dwindling
version of
now.
China.
Now they
Yeah.
think they're like some super weird made up race that somehow just stood there and no one died. Anyway, I think we'll wrap it up for today. It's nearly 2 hours.
Okay. Okay.
It's really good to have you on, Cindy, and I think Regan.
Yeah, great chat. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope I was like,
No, it's very interesting. Yeah.
or anything. I'm thinking back to the fact that I had said that I hated the sound of Cantonese. I'm worried that I'm gonna get dragged.
No, I said that before.
英雄花间意，歌曲人影稀。谁知明日时分里，台上望真心。唱一曲别离，谁在君怀里？昨日相依，今夜又相离，各领笑泪滴。一出悲喜，众里佳人老矣。为戏武林英雄美人在交替，笑谈千年悲。